Should the Dallas Cowboys tag Osa Odighizuwa before free agency? We'll get into it next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your mailbag questions, including, could the Cowboys actually consider drafting Tyler Warren at number 12? Who is going to be the QB2 in 2025? But let's start with Osa Odighizuwa, who has gotten some more attention over the last couple of weeks. There was a tweet this morning from Bob Sturm, friend of the show, that said he believes the Cowboys should transition tag Osa Odighizuwa before he hits free agency. I've seen some other people thinking that they should franchise tag him. What do you think should happen here?
Yeah, this has been on everyone's mind, and I think it did kind of start a firestorm this morning when he tweeted out the idea of transition tagging Osa. And there's a lot of angles to this, right? There's a lot of angles to this market, really, just because of the heavy draft class, how good this defensive tackle draft class is going to be, the kind of lack of multiple top end defensive tackles in this class. And I think it's really Osa and Milton Williams, and really those guys are it. And frankly, they're also very similar kind of guys, right? Like the undersized pass rushing 3-tech. So there's a lot to this. So I think the transition tag, it makes some sense in the sense that, like,
let's explain the transition tag real quick, in case you're not familiar. So I believe it's going to pay, if the Cowboys put the transition tag on, it would guarantee Osa Odighizuwa $18.6 million a year if he signed that and played on the deal. He obviously would. What would happen is, on the transition tag, a player hits free agency. They are eligible to sign any deal they want. And once they sign a deal, the Cowboys have the right to match that deal. If they decide to, great, you keep him. If you don't, he leaves to the other team, and the Cowboys get no compensation.
Now let's talk, before we get into this situation again. Let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the previous situations where this has happened, right? Like, I think you and I were talking pre-show about how it kind of played out with Lamar Jackson. Why don't you explain it to the folks a little bit about how that worked with Lamar Jackson and maybe the hope for the Cowboys?
I think the Ravens used the non-exclusive franchise tag on Lamar Jackson, which is similar, where Jackson was technically a free agent, and other teams had the ability to go out and offer Lamar Jackson a deal, which you could sign, and then the Ravens could match any deal without getting any compensation back. What ended up happening is a lot of these teams that had interest at quarterbacks just didn't want to waste the time trying to sign Lamar Jackson to a deal, knowing that the Ravens were just going to match any offer. So they felt like, hey, let's not waste our valuable time so the Ravens don't have to do all this hard work, and they're just going to match it. So it actually drove down Lamar Jackson's market. And this has happened before, where guys get the transition tag or the non-exclusive franchise tag, and NFL teams just are like, you know what, it's not worth our time negotiating for 9 hours during free agency while we could be turning our attention to other players that are actually going to be on the market. That is one of the advantages of the tag. The disadvantage is that there's 31 other teams out there that are now talking to one of your best players.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, I think in that specific scenario, you were talking about, their franchise quarterback. There wasn't any way that Baltimore was going to let,
no matter what the deal was,
leave, no matter what the deal was.
Right.
That's not the case with Osa, right? Like, I mean, I could easily, first of all, that's the thing, is that the number is such, right? Like, what'd you say it was, 18.6?
I think it's 18-ish million. Yeah.
I mean, last year, Metabuke, right, from the Ravens, got a 4-year, $98 million deal. So that's
basically $25 million a year. Yep.
Yeah. So basically $25 million a year. So that's, kind of the standard right now. And I think that Osa is probably going to command a very similar, if not, market adjusted version of that. So, I think that the number itself is it's not likely to hold anybody back, right? Because if you were going to pay them $25 million, you're certainly not going to be scared away by the not even $19 million tag. So I think it helps the Cowboys in the sense that, yeah, they're not having to negotiate. Like they're kind of offloading the negotiation process.
Yeah, they're not having to worry about it. They can spend it. It also helps them not to bid against themselves, because maybe Osa's asking for 24 million and the Cowboys are offering 20, making these numbers up. But they want to see what actually the market looks like in free agency. And if the market comes back at 21, boom, the Cowboys just match that and they're happy with the compromise.
Yeah, I think it helps in kind of look. I only think it helps if you're serious about paying Osa decent money to come back, right? Because otherwise, what are you doing here, right? Like if you're transition tagging him, then you must be willing to pay him $4 or $5 million above that transition tag in order to make this gambit even worth it, right? Like, so I think that's if the Cowboys do this, I think it's heartening in the sense that it shows you that they may be potentially looking into the options of what it would take to retain Osa Odighizuwa. I think the other thing here is that's interesting is that they can't really use the franchise tag, can they? I mean, because they kind of need that for Micah. Like,
well, no, you could use the franchise tag because Micah's
still got another year left. Yeah.
The problem with the franchise tag is I think it's 25 or 26 million. So you're not getting any discount. Right?
It's close to what you're expecting him to get. Right.
And so there's no way in that 20, let's say it's 26 million. It's a $26 million cap hit for the 2025 season that cannot be moved or changed.
Yep. Fully guaranteed. So it's, I mean, that's the question, right? Is that like you're trying to use the lower tag to save potentially $3 or $4 million a year on this deal. I think it makes some sense. I don't know that it's quite the infallible gambit that sure. we think it would be.
So I've been thinking about this situation a lot, and you tell me where I'm wrong or where my thinking is flawed. But in a vacuum, I think Osa Odighizuwa is worth somewhere between 21 and 24 million per year. Now you can tell me where and how many years, and we can discuss that. But he led the NFL in QB hits last year. I still think he's an ascending player who's gotten better every year. I value his durability, but I also understand that he's not a top 5 defensive tackle in the NFL. He's probably not a top 10 defensive tackle. And part of me wonders, like, if the Cowboys are spending $23 million a year on Osa and $38 million a year on Micah Parsons, so basically what, $60 million a year on 2 defensive linemen, both who are undersized, and it still wasn't good enough last year to get it done on defense. Are you just spending too much cap space on your defensive line, or are you better off to sign Micah and use that $23 million a year to add more depth? I don't know the answer. I think I would just default to keeping the best players, but I do think you can make an argument like, hey, investing $60 million a year on 2 players on your defensive line is a lot.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think that the other thing that kind of makes this even more complicated is that this is a historically good defensive tackle draft class, right? And I think it's easy to kind of look at these guys in the draft and say, man, I could take this guy in the 3rd and this guy in the 5th and cobble together some really nice defensive tackle play, and young and cheap, and save myself $20 million, at the position. I think that there's something to what you're saying, though, as well, is the idea that, that you can sign Osa, but you've got 2 of the same guys who were good, but not good enough, in previous seasons, who are now even more undersized for the defense that they're playing in, because, there's going to be more of a premium on size with Eberflus than there was at least with Quinn. That's for sure. Right. And now your 2 best defensive linemen are also your 2 most undersized defensive linemen. The season is very long. The game is trending more towards a running attack game. So you worry about how well those 2 guys specifically will hold up over the long course of the season without, big bodies to kind of relieve them in certain situations. So, and that's the other thing too about Osa, is that even if you sign Osa, I was talking about this on DLLS today. I even if you sign Osa, like you still have to go get another defensive tackle at least.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're
100%.
not even
Maybe
close to
two.
being done. So yeah, I tend to think that I'm not going to be so mad at them if they bow out of this free agent market, price war, once it crosses the $25 million range, right?
Yep.
Because they're going to say, you know what, we'll save the money. We think we can kind of piece this together with some of the guys that we can get in the draft. I mean, look, at that point, you could even consider a defensive tackle at 12 if the right one was there for you. So I do think that there are lots of ways to attack this. The good news for the Cowboys is there are, lots of good defensive tackles in the draft. And that's going to give them opportunity, even if they miss out on Osa or Milton Williams or any of these free agent defense.
I just default back to, I think Osa's a really good player who continues to get better, and he plays a lot. And if I feel like I'm overpaying that guy by $3 million a year, $4 million a year, I can live with that because Osa plays and he plays really, really well. And I would hate to see what this defense would look like without him, because they just don't have another starting caliber defensive tackle on the roster right now. All right, let's go back to the draft. Let's talk about one of your pet cats, Tyler Warren. Could he actually be considered an option for the Cowboys at pick number 12? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or just picking a player to get a clutch 3, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets, and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions today. And this one from Scott. He wants to know, Landon, do you really think that Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, is an option for the Cowboys at pick number 12?
It should be. They should consider it. Like for all the things that the Cowboys are looking for out of their 12th pick in the first round, they need somebody that can kind of help revitalize the offense. They need somebody that can kind of change the angles on defense. I think Tyler Warren is a guy that can do that for your offense, right? Like, I think that he's I think one of the things that we talked about a lot is the Cowboys need to kind of find a secondary weapon, to complement CeeDee Lamb, right? And they also need to find a way to kind of get their run game back on track to provide better opportunities, windows when it's passing time for Dak Prescott, and something just to rely on because, look, the game is trending more towards running the football and attacking these too high shell defenses with ground and pound attack to force those safeties to come down, and then you can throw over the top. I think Tyler Warren helps you accomplish a little bit of both, right? Like, he can be a blocker in the run game. If you want to use him in conjunction with Ferguson, there's no better a way to throw the football than out of a run formation. I think it also helps with your offensive line situation as you're trying to figure out exactly who's playing which tackle to have, double tight ends on each side to kind of help with the blocking scheme and that sort of thing. And then on top of that, you talk about what Clayton Adams is bringing into this organization with some of the changes in the run game, having a big body tight end who can, move the needle as a blocker, I think is something that's really going to be helpful for this team moving forward. So I just think he checks a lot of boxes. He's a great receiver. He's a very balanced player, though. He's a good blocker. And I think, again, the combination, I love the moves that slot your players into the spots that they're supposed to be. I think if you put him in at tight end 1 and then Ferguson is your tight end 2, like you've got a really dynamic pair of tight ends suddenly. And then on top of that, you've also got other guys down the roster that you can kind of supplement there. It makes it easier to kind of create a more dynamic offense than trying to ham fist a wide receiver that you may not. I can't believe I used that term. A wide receiver again that may not be maybe a good compliment in the passing game, but maybe doesn't give you anything in the run game. I think Tyler Warren is a guy who could come in, be a reliable outlet for Dak when he's needed one at times. He loves throwing the ball to tight ends.
He does.
And so I think that this is another guy that you could send up the seam, and he's just another big body tight end that Dak's going to be able to throw seam balls that he likes to. So, there's a lot to like about Tyler Warren, and that's not even covering all the other cool stuff you can do with the Tyler Warren,
Sure.
like goal line quarterback and all that stuff. So,
well, it's kind of a footnote, but honestly, if you're trying to protect Dak because of some of the injury stuff, having a tight end run like your quarterback sneaks, like the Ravens have with Mark Andrews, or the Chiefs do it with Travis Kelce and Noah Gray. It's just a little bit less wear and tear on your quarterback. So it's not nothing. I'm not saying you should draft a tight end high only because of that, but it does have some value. I think my thing with Tyler Warren is I've always envisioned the perfect tight end with Dak Prescott is a guy that gets open really quickly, from the 0 to 10 yards, creates separation, and Dak is just accurate, puts it on the money. But Warren's not really that guy. What Warren is he's just big, athletic, and once he gets the ball in his hands, he's just really hard to bring down. I saw today Lance Zierlein from NFL.com. He put out his list of top players in this draft, and he has Tyler Warren 4th overall. And his comp for him was Jeremy Shockey. Giants tight end. And I see that. He's just so big. He's big but athletic at the same time, and you hate to compare anybody to Gronkowski, but his movement skills kind of remind me of that at times as well. But I think if you're just taking hey, we're just going to take the best player, not worry about what it's going to look like in year 1, I think Tyler Warren has got to be an option.
Yeah, I mean, he's not Brock Bowers. He's not that type
he's
of tight
different.
end. He's a different type. He's a bigger body guy, but
see, Bowers is the type of tight end that I have always thought would fit well with Dak, but Warren is a very good tight end prospect in himself.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that we have to look at where we're going, not where we've been, right?
Correct.
And I think that's the thing is that Dak has been trending towards more and more receiving tight ends because that's where the league has been going. But now that things have kind of flipped back a bit, you need tight ends with a little bit more versatility to work against some of these modern defenses. I think it makes sense to have a big body guy that you can trust. And that's the thing too, is that Warren is really kind of unique in the sense that, he is a big body guy, right? That not necessarily someone that you would on the surface level look at and think, man, that's a dynamic tight end. But you say it you get him a ball on an outlet pass, because everything else is open. And if he's got 2 yards of space between him and the defender, just because he's stuck away or something.
Yeah.
Good luck on him not getting the first down, right? Because once he gets momentum, he's a big body. He doesn't come down hard. I compared him with the ball in his hands to Mike Allstott. If you watch him running with the football, not as a running back, but once he has the ball in his hands, he's a big body that everyone in the secondary braces for big contact. They're like, oh God, I gotta shield up, get ready to hit this guy. They come in to try to lay the wood on him. And dude, I lived in Tampa during their Super Bowl run. I remember Allstott as well as anybody. One of my favorite things Allstott used to do is safeties would come down hard, ready to take on Mike Allstott, fullback. He's going to kill you. And what does Mike Allstott do? He just sidesteps you. He just lets you run right past him. It's just like a subtle move. And you see that with Warren where he's lowering his pads and then he's sidestepping guys and they're not even getting shots on him. So I'm a big fan, obviously. I just think he has a unique skill set, right? And it's you don't see big body guys that have yak ability like that very often. You don't see guys who can give you, goal line quarterback snaps like that. You don't see dynamic after the catch guys who are also solid blockers on the edge as well. I just think he's a unique talent, and this is a draft that is really lacking in unique talents.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the reaction would be from Cowboy fans if they drafted Tyler Warren at
Another
12.
tight end.
But I'd be for it because I think he's one of the top 12 players in this class. And adding another weapon to the passing game, I think certainly would help. Let's talk about the backup quarterback situation, because right now the Cowboys have one quarterback on the roster. Who will be Dak's backup in 2025? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcast. All right, Landon, the last question. This one comes from Jake. He wants to know, who is going to be the backup quarterback in 2025? Trey Lance is a free agent. Cooper Rush is a free agent. What happens?
It's a good question. I mean, and it's an important question, right? Because we're dealing with a quarterback who has missed multiple seasons now with season-ending injuries. So not missed multiple seasons, but missed multiple ends of seasons because of season-ending surgeries or injuries.
He said 2 season-ending injuries. There you go.
Thank you. Look, I think Cooper Rush has got to be the top of the list, right? Like you kind of just have to see what he's looking at, what the number is. The one thing we talked about with Shanahan, with the Schottenheimer coming in, is that, the continuity there. So, obviously that makes some sense in Cooper Rush's situation as well. I think outside of that, there are a list of decent backup quarterbacks available in free agency. I mean, I think that's the one thing you can say is your kind of saving grace, is that if you really wanted to go get a high end QB2, there certainly are some available. But I think, you probably going to have to wait until the QB carousel kind of finishes up, because some of these folks at the top, Darnold and some of these other names, Justin Fields potentially, are going to be
all those guys.
Yeah, they're going to be considered for starting spots somewhere, right? Like at some place. So you may have to wait for the kind of the circus to die down a little bit and then go get your quarterback. And I would be shocked too if they drafted somebody, in the later rounds as well.
5th, 6th round. They've got a bunch of picks late day 3. I guess the thing I want to know is, what does Brian Schottenheimer want from his backup quarterback? Yeah. Does he want somebody that maybe more of a pocket passer, come in, manage the game, or does he want somebody with some athleticism to maybe help the run game a little bit if Dak were to go down? I think that's what's really interesting, because if you want the more traditional backup, I think Cooper Rush makes sense. I also think there's some options, like, Cowboy fans, don't kill me, but like Daniel Jones could do that. Yeah. Maybe Mac Jones, who actually played pretty well in Jacksonville this year as a backup. There are options out there. Or would you rather roll the dice and try to bring back Trey Lance and have him elevate to that status? Or do you go out and try to sign Justin Fields because you're worried about Dak Prescott's health? I'm curious to see what they do here.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too. Like, are you looking for a guy who can do 75% of Dak Prescott? Or are you looking for a guy that maybe when he comes in the game, he adds a different element to the offense, right? Like with his legs or whatever. And I think, Daniel Jones is an interesting name. And again, I know Cowboys fans hate it, but like he is an interesting name in the sense that if you needed a guy to come in and win a couple games, right, you can have like a little bit of extra, quarterback run stuff, especially with Clayton Adams coming in, all the counter stuff. You could run some QB counter, that sort of thing. Is, you have a guy with some legs. I think Justin Fields, obviously similar situation, right? If you wanted to sign a guy that you felt like, okay, maybe we don't just do, Dak light on our offense if Dak gets hurt. Maybe we actually change the dynamics of it a little bit. We run a little bit more QB read, some read option stuff, let the quarterback use his legs a little bit more. If you do that, however, you probably need a pretty strong third quarterback as well. So,
here's the other thing is, like, I was looking at, like, Spot Track had the estimated market values for some of those quarterbacks, and like Trey Lance was like $3 million a year, where Justin Fields and Daniel Jones were like in the $16 million a year range, which I don't think Dallas is going to pay $16 million a year for a backup when they're already paying Dak Prescott $60 million a year. But would you rather pay Mac Jones $7? I'm making this up. Mac Jones $7 or Trey Lance 3, or Cooper Rush 6, that's where it gets a little hard.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's almost like you almost want to take Cooper Rush back, right? Just because it's a known quantity. He's worked in this offense before. I don't know. I mean, I do think that there is something to the idea that it's, I think Cooper Rush is now 30 years old, 31 years old. Right?
It's getting up there, and it was pretty clearly worse this year.
Yeah, it certainly was.
Previous seasons.
So I wouldn't be upset with them if they decided to go another route. Whether that's maybe trying Trey Lance some more, or like you said, Mac Jones at $7 million. That seems doable to me.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable. And Mac Jones is a good enough quarterback that, he can win you a couple games while Dak's gone if you need him to.
Here's the one position I probably wouldn't be proactive in the market. Like, I would rather just see, like, let all these quarterbacks kind of find homes and then sort through the 3 or 4 that's left. Because I could see somebody like Gardner Minshew not getting a starting job, obviously, and then the backup jobs filling up pretty quickly. But if Gardner Minshew is your backup at 2 years, $10 million, I think that's fine, right? Like, I'm okay waiting here.
Yeah, this is one market seriously where there's a lot of guys and there's not a lot of seats. So
No.
I think this is the one spot where you probably don't even need to do anything until the draft and wait, maybe even wait till after the draft, see if you get like a 5th rounder that you like or something like that, and then just kind of adjust your veteran quarterback signing based on what you get out of the draft.
Because there's always going to be guys like Will Grier who are available in June and July. That, like, if you're so worried about your backup quarterback situation, Joe Flacco, I'm sure, is going to be available after the draft. If you feel like you absolutely have to get a veteran quarterback, I'm not rushing to go out and pay any of these guys $8-9 million a year.
Would you be shocked if Cooper Rush is still on the market?
No, because I mean, the only team that I would worry about would be like the Saints because of some of the connections there.
Yeah,
but they've got several quarterbacks, including Spencer Rattler, who they drafted last year, Jake Haener, who they drafted the year before that. They've got Derek Carr, so maybe they don't even have the room for somebody like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that certainly is a dearth of, like, starting level quality starter quarterbacks in the NFL. There is not a lacking in backup quarterbacks who could come in and win a game or two if you like. They're just all over the place. It's almost becoming like the running back market. So you really, really can wait and see what you want. And the good news is you can wait and probably still sign a guy who may even have experience in your system, like Will Grier or Cooper Rush. So there are options there.
Because the truth of the matter is, most of the time, there's not a big difference between quarterback 40 and quarterback 65 in the NFL because they're all bad for the most part, right? You're just talking about different degrees of bad. So I'm not spending a bunch of money to get a backup quarterback, even with Dak Prescott's injury history. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.